Cash Money. We got the BG Chopper Sit in the Ghetto and Store. That's platinum. We got Juvenile 400 Degrees. That's triple platinum. We got the High Boys just went platinum in 4 weeks. So imagine what it's gonna be later on. Then we got me, October 19, Lil Wayne, Block is Hot, coming out platinum.
Everybody always coming up to me, they want to rap and everything. How did you blow up? It took years. You didn't happen overnight, right?
Nah, I mean, well, I think the way I blew up, I invested into myself. I ain't never went looking for no company to put no record out on me. And I think it's a difference. If you believe in something and it's you, then you got to invest in it. You got to invest, and you got to invest into yourself.
I got to say this because this is very important.
Please.
Puffy and them was rocking, but they wasn't getting no money like Master P was. Wasn't getting no way out money. On No Limit had money. Everybody on No Limit had a house, a car, 2 guns, and a bank account.
But it was all about shining, the chrome thing, the ice thing, you know what I'm saying? You know, just Cash Money being Cash Money, neighborhood superstars, and stunting.
It's literally impossible to tell the story of hip-hop without mentioning Louisiana and the role it's played. This is the home of stars like Master P, Juvenile, Kevin Gates, and Lil Boosie, as well as megastars like Lil Wayne and NBA Youngboy. The state has also been home to some of the most iconic artist-owned labels in hip-hop history, like Cash Money and No Limit. And people like Master P, Birdman, and Slim were a huge factor in artists taking control of their own careers, betting on themselves, and turning down typical artist deals, demanding partnerships with labels to keep ownership of their music. It's undeniable that Louisiana has had a significant impact on the sound and trends of hip-hop. So in this video, we'll take a look at the history of Louisiana rap. There's one quick announcement before we get into the history of Louisiana, and that is this video was sponsored by Light Supply. Now, Light Supply has all the lighting needs you would possibly require for around the house use. LED strip lights to energize and decorate any type of space, and light and motion sensing night lights for safety and convenience in bedrooms, bathrooms, hallways, and anywhere else you could possibly need light. And now is the perfect time to purchase because for a limited time they're running a sale on their site. And all viewers from this video can use the code NSS2023 to get free shipping on any order of 2 or more products. So if you have any type of lighting needs around the house, make sure to click the link in the description and check out Light Supply. Now let's get into the video. Of all the places in the world, Louisiana has hands down one of the richest musical histories. In the 1800s, Louisiana played a role in creating blues and popularizing the genre in America, and in the later years would produce huge artists in the genre like B.B. King and Robert Johnson. In the 1900s, New Orleans invented jazz, and groups like the King Oliver Creole Jazz Band, as well as solo musicians like Louis Armstrong, Sidney Bechet, and Jelly Roll Morton, went on to popularize the new sound and make the genre into what it's known for today. Louisiana has been in a unique position of having multiple countries and cultures shape it, leading to a melting pot of cultures and musical traditions from African, European, Native American, and Caribbean influences. The culture in Louisiana is very distinct from anywhere else in America, and this is reflected in the genres like Cajun music as well as traditions like Mardi Gras. The state's rich history extends into the genre of hip-hop as well. Hip-hop reached Louisiana around the late 70s, and the people embraced the sound and ran with it. In the 80s, New Orleans rap groups like the Rescue Crew, Ninja Crew, and New York Incorporated popped up. Names like Manny Fresh, Mia X, Sporty T, KLC, Gregory D, DJ Precise, MCT Tucker, and DJ Irv began buzzing, and New Orleans had an active club scene. Over in Baton Rouge, a group called Reality was pioneering the movement in their city by becoming one of the first rap groups in Louisiana period to touch Billboard Top 200 with a big record called Missing Kids. At this time, there still weren't many physical records being produced and distributed, but Manny Fresh and Gregory D made waves when they teamed up to drop a collab project that was one of the biggest early New Orleans albums. Around 1989, An interesting phenomenon occurred when a song called Drag Rap from a New York group called the Showboys made its way down to New Orleans, where DJs would use the break in clubs and it would go crazy. The song became famous and all Louisiana natives referred to it as the Triggerman beat. Around this time, another song called Bullet from a Gun from a UK artist called Derek B hit the city, and DJs used the break from this beat as well, and it became known as the Brown Beat. In clubs all over New Orleans, DJs would perform sets scratching between these two beats, and MCs would get on doing call and response with the people in the club trying to move the crowd. And this was the origin of bounce music. Today, bounce music is known as twerk music and viewed as something mainly for females, but according to DJ Precise, it had gangsta origins.
Once the girls took it, that was a wrap.
So it was more like some street shit first.
Yeah, it was gangster. Bounce was actually gangster music. They wasn't talking about no girls or nothing or this is, nah. When we was on there talking about twerk something, we wasn't talking about twerking like that. We was talking about twerking at work. We were talking about twerk something, meaning make it work. I'm gonna give you this package and you twerk that bitch.
In the early years of bounce, it was extremely popular in the clubs, but nobody thought to actually record it. Then in 1991, MC T Tucker and DJ Irv decided to put the new bounce sound on a record and distribute it. They released a single called Where They At, which had the Triggerman beat as well as call and response lyrics. The song was very successful and showed people that it was possible to sell this new sound bubbling up, and it wasn't just limited to live club performances. Following this record, DJ Jimmy released a project called It's Jimmy. The entire project was produced by DJ Precise, and it was the first ever full bounce album. It was well received and ended up going gold. Following the success of Where They At and It's Jimmy, more and more bounce records began coming out. Everlasting Hitman had a big record called Bounce Baby Bounce, and Mia X had a popular record called The Payback, which was a response to Where They At. And DJ Jubilee put out Do the Jubilee All, which also gained traction in the city. In the early 90s, the bounce scene was extremely active, but New Orleans had other rappers outside of the bounce genre. People like Bust Down, MC Thick, and others were making noise in the scene with more traditional 90s hip-hop records. Bust Down was an important figure in the early Louisiana scene, and he made a name for himself with Too Short and 2 Live Crew influenced raps, and even ended up catching the attention of Uncle Luke and eventually signing with him. MC Thick was another early New Orleans artist who broke onto the scene with the West Coast influenced style of rap. In 1991, two brothers, Brian and Ronald Williams, aka Birdman and Slim, started a record label to sign some of the bubbling talent in the city, and some of their earliest artists were Miss T, Pimp Daddy, Kilo G, Lil Slim, and Mr. Ivan. Manny Fresh was an early pioneer, impacting the New Orleans scene both DJing and producing, but in 1993, he decided to sign with Cash Money, where over the years he would play a critical role in shaping the sound and ultimately end up as one of the most influential producers in history. There were even New Orleans artists outside of the city doing their thing. Out in Richmond, California, a Louisiana native named Percy Miller, aka Master P, had opened a record shop and started a rap career of his own, as well as his own label, which he called No Limit. In the early years, he figured out the formula to moving his own units himself and making himself a name. Over in Houston, a Louisiana rapper called Big Mike had made his way onto Rap-A-Lot Records and found himself on songs alongside the Ghetto Boys, and for a short period of time, he was even around Death Row in studio sessions with Tupac and Dr. Dre. In 1994, he took everything he had learned from these experiences, dropping his debut album, Something Serious, a project widely regarded as a Southern classic, with huge tracks like Playa Playa and Having Things that still get love to this day. In addition to New Orleans, Baton Rouge also had a few successful rappers in the early 90s. In 1990, a Baton Rouge artist called Kuiper dropped a song called Tic Tac Toe that would end up getting him a deal with The Atlantic, and with their help, it sold over 500,000 copies. There were also other Baton Rouge rappers like MC Nero Baby, The Bottom Posse, and CeeLo. Through the mid-90s, the music scene continued to bubble and was on the verge of touching the mainstream, and Master P would be the first to reach it. In 1994, he decided to return home to New Orleans, taking what he had learned about selling records up in Richmond and signing local artists like Mia X, Mystikal, Cain and Abel, Mr. Servon, Silk the Shocker, Mac, and Fiend. Arguably, the most important addition to No Limit was the collective Beats by the Pound, a collective of producers including Moby Dick, KLC, Odell, Craig B, and Carlos Stevens. This group would handle all the production on No Limit albums through the late 90s. So by the mid-90s, Master P was back home and all set to begin building an empire. The arrival of No Limit in New Orleans would also lead to friction on the music scene. In the mid-90s, Cash Money signed more artists like Magnolia Shorty, BG, and a group called UNLV. UNLV took off in the city and became the biggest stars on Cash Money through the mid-90s. And it just so happened that they had problems with Mystikal from No Limit, resulting in several back and forths on wax, the most famous being Drag 'Em in the River by UNLV and Here I Go by Mystikal. There are also plenty of rumors on the internet of street events connected to this beef. Whether or not this situation was the catalyst, the beef would continue on for years, with several artists on both sides, including Master P and Birdman themselves, sending shots at each other through music, as Cash Money and No Limit remained in a fierce competition. No Limit would be the first sign to reach the mainstream because in 1996, Master P signed an 80-20 profit split distribution deal with Priority Records, where he maintained ownership of the music, but got the resources of a big label behind him, and this same year he got nationwide attention with the release of the Ice Cream Man album with the single Bout It Bout It. In 1997, he dropped Ghetto D, which saw massive success, propelled by the single Make 'Em Say Following this release, Master P became a household name. In the 2-year period following the success of Ghetto D, Master P was very strategic when it came to capitalizing on the spotlight. He made sure to spread the shine by making sure all No Limit artists were constantly featured on each other's albums and making appearances and videos. Of the roster of No Limit artists, Mystikal was the biggest star next to P. His first album with No Limit, titled Unpredictable, went platinum. His second, Ghetto Fabulous, sold even more, moving 386,000 units in just the first week. Throughout this period, Mystikal had multiple Billboard hits, as well as people like Mariah Carey and Outkast reaching out to him for features. Mystikal was on another level, but everybody in No Limit was eating. C Murder dropped Life or Death, which performed well, hitting number 3 on the Billboard Top 200 charts. Soulja Slim put out Give It To Him Raw, which also did well commercially, but unfortunately, after releasing this album, he would end up catching a robbery case and having to sit in jail at the peak of his career and the crazy No Limit run. Silk the Shocker dropped his debut album, Charge It to the Game. Fiend released There's One in Every Family. Cain and Abel put out Am I My Brother's Keeper. Mac dropped Shell Shock, and Mia X, who was already almost a decade into her career, continued doing her thing, releasing a popular album called Unladylike. All of these albums were successful, hitting Billboard and moving units. A key factor behind all the success was the production from Beats by the Pound, which incorporated high-energy up-tempo melodies and hard-hitting drums, perfect for the No Limit artists. The label was the place to be, and in 1998, Master P was even able to convince Snoop Dogg, who had only recently left Death Row Records, to come and join No Limit. Snoop's first project on the label was The Games to Be Sold, Not Told, which saw a good amount of success. On top of all the music No Limit was releasing, Master P also extended No Limit's reach into the film world, releasing his first movie in 1997 titled I'm Bout It. No Limit's influence extended outside of the city of New Orleans because around 98, Master P discovered a Baton Rouge group called the Concentration Camp, and the group was a small label founded by OG Baton Rouge rapper C-Lo. The artists on the label included C-Lo, Young Bleed, Happy Perez, Max Minnelli, and Jay Vaughn. It was a single, a fool, off their first album that ended up catching Master P's attention and getting Young Bleed a solo deal with No Limit, and the Concentration Camp as a collective receiving a distribution deal with Priority. Young Bleed's first album with No Limit, titled My Balls and My Word, was very successful, going gold in just a month, adding on to a string of other successful No Limit releases. Up to this point, No Limit was indisputably leading the Louisiana scene, but in 1998, Cash Money caught back up with them. Around the mid-90s, Birdman and Slim had been experiencing problems with a lot of their artists over money disputes, leading them to clean house and start over with the new group of rappers. In 1997, Cash Money's newest group, the Hot Boys, made its debut, dropping their first album, Get It How You Live. The Hot Boys was a group composed of 4 rappers, including Juvenile, Lil Wayne, BG, and Turk. Their debut album made a lot of noise and secured Birdman and Slim a lucrative deal with Universal, with a $3 million advance and 85-15 profit split in Cash Money's favor. 1997 was also the year Juvenile dropped his first solo project with Cash Money, titled Soldier Rags, which did well, but was nothing compared with what was to come. In 1998, Juvenile dropped his 400 Degrees project, produced by Manny Fresh. The project took off, gaining nationwide attention, and was the mainstream's introduction to Juvenile and Cash Money. The driving factor behind the success of this album was the single, Back That Ass Up, but the whole project was great, and to this day, many would classify it as one of the most influential projects of the past 30 years. Back That Ass Up was a national hit, and also the first time a song from the local bounce genre reached the mainstream. Over the previous decade, Manny Fresh had been perfecting his sound and experimenting, mixing classical instrumentation, including all types of string instruments as well as pianos, with leads and other synthetic sounds, and incorporating drums influenced by the popular New Orleans bounce genre. Manny used this new style he had cultivated to single-handedly produce basically every Cash Money record during this period for Juvenile, the Hot Boys, and all their other artists. Following 400 Degrees, Juvenile was red hot, and by extension, so were the rest of the Hot Boys. Their second project, Guerrilla Warfare, dropped in 1999, hitting the charts and quickly going platinum. This same year, Juvenile continued his run with his second album, The G Code, also going platinum. His fellow Hot Boys had big releases of their own as well. BG dropped Chopper City in the Ghetto, also going platinum. And the 16-year-old Lil Wayne dropped his debut album, The Block Is Hot, which also went platinum. While Cash Money and No Limit were dominating the mainstream in the late 90s, towards the end of this period, 2 unlikely rappers blew up in the city. In 1999, an artist called Katie Red saw some early success off a project called Melphamine Block Party. Then, in the early 2000s, another New Orleans bounce artist called Big Frida popped up on the scene with records like Oh Yeah and Gin in My System. Given bounce music's gangster roots, the emergence of these 2 artists came completely out of left field and took the genre in a completely different direction. Frida would end up becoming the leader and the biggest artist in the new era of bounce, leading to huge artists like Beyonce and Drake reaching out to do collabs. By the early 2000s, New Orleans' crazy run from the late 90s began to die down. No Limit started falling apart, starting in 1999 when Beats by the Pound left. They were the architects behind the No Limit sound, and their absence was notable going into the future. Around 2000, Master P and Mystikal decided to part ways, and Mystikal left No Limit, but his career was far from over. And his first album after leaving No Limit was a huge success, with the biggest hit of his career, Shake Your Ass, hitting the top of Billboard. Shortly after Mystikal left, Snoop did as well. Then in 2003, Soulja Slim passed away. So by the early 2000s, No Limit was a shell of his former self. Around the same period, Cash Money also began to fall apart. In 2001, the Hot Boys split up, and Juvenile, BG, and Turk left over money issues with Birdman. Juvenile would end up returning before leaving for good in 2005, along with Manny Fresh, who also had money grievances of his own. Through the early 2000s, Cash Money was in a rough place, but unlike No Limit, they still had one star left. Lil Wayne, who was only a teenager when the Hot Boys were in their prime, was finally getting his turn to shine on his own, and he was about to go on one of the craziest runs hip-hop would ever experience. Also, in Baton Rouge, young artists like Boosie and Webby were getting started in careers of their own as well, and a new era was beginning in Louisiana. So in part 2, we'll cover the rise of these artists and others who followed like Currency, Kevin Gates, NBA Youngboy, Jada Youngin, and much more, so stay tuned.